All right, cool. And we are now live. Welcome. Thank you guys all so much for stopping by. If you don't already know, every Tuesday, Nostalgianomics and I do our live Q&A where we talk about a specific topic of just what's kind of going on in the market. And then if there's any sort of important news to break, that is also something we'll discuss. And then the last 15 to 20 minutes of the video, we'll usually leave it up to questions and answers. I mean, do you want to introduce yourself? I feel like at this point it's pretty...
Breaking news! What's going on in the hobby, Eli?
Oh my God. Cringe. That's what's going on. No, I'm kidding. As far as it goes, we'll just start off with the main kind of conversation topic with, I guess we'll say news. It isn't something that's relevant in terms of like Pokemon company announcements, but looking at distro pages, we have started to see a huge amount of supply being flushed out for the Sword and Shield era product. And then as well, 151 reprinted product, which we got obviously additional waves for, is starting to also run out. So for example, Lost Origin Silver Tempest Build and Battle Stadiums, I've already talked to you guys about that being a really good, deeply discounted item. That started to go away. The crappy trainer toolkits have been being flash sold on a lot of distributor pages. Sword and Shield sleeved, blister cases are starting to go up in price and go away. You're starting to see 151 UPCs completely go away from distro pages, like completely just gone. ETBs, I mean, you were buying them at one point for like $31 a box, and now they're being sold for like $40 a box as they're getting close to running out of supply on certain distro pages. So, more of the story, the theme is specific items of leftover Sword and Shield era product and high demand reprinted items are starting to dwindle. I mean, Crown Zenith, I would say, is the only one that has not been completely disappeared. I mean, on some distros they're charging $35 a pop, but at the end of the day, it would not surprise me if once all of these other products start to disappear, that Crown Zenith kind of follows. So kind of discussing on that topic, we're really going to try and get into it with you guys on what we think this could mean for the overall market in general, supply terms, because once product starts to run out and prices start to go up, what's next? And we can also go over that when looking at some of the prices on how it's affected TCG player.
Yeah, I mean, talking about 151. So, guys, in Pokemon, not every set moves the same way, right? Like, so you could say, oh, I'm just going to wait to pick up, Paradox Rift until X amount of time when it's getting closer to being out of print, whatever, I have time. Here's the thing. Look back to Celebrations. Celebrations, it was affordable for a little bit of time, but it shot up relatively quickly, a lot quicker than other sets have. And then, for the past while now, it's been sort of stagnant, maybe drifting up a little bit. 151 could be one of those sets, whereas maybe we get some more reprints down the road, and maybe it does affect it a little bit. But for the time being, there's none announced. For the time being, it's the UPCs are gone, the ETBs are about to be gone, booster bundles, whatever it may be. The prices are going up. They're already starting. You have the UPCs now in the hundreds. You got the ETBs in the mid 50s, pushing 60 here soon, and they're going. It's going to be just like Celebrations. It's going to move quicker. Everyone's wanting it. Everyone's opening it. Here's the other thing to think about when you're thinking about waiting for a certain amount of time to move into a product. When it comes to a mainline booster box set, I get it. When it comes to sets like this, right? You might not have more time to move into UPCs. I'm not saying, I'm not trying to make anyone FOMO, but just realize there is a fact that if they do a reprint, it may not include UPCs. It could be just ETBs and booster bundles and maybe some kind of collection box. Like, there's a chance that was the last reprint of UPC. So those are the things you have to think about if you are moving into things early. Could be time. What do you think, man?
I mean, it's ultimately, in my mind, just a question of, I mean, we talked about it a little bit on last week's video, so we're not going to try and harp on it too much, but what's kind of the next direction that the Pokemon company is really going to be going with this, right? Are they going to be focusing on trying to take a lot of their lackluster demand products that we've seen so far within the Scarlet and Violet era and tie them to reprinted product? Like I said, we're not going to mainly talk about that, but we're just, kind of thinking hypothetically here. Because alternatively speaking, if these items do begin to start going out of supply, are they hoping that the demand for the product is then going to bleed into, the lower demand items. I feel like that's extremely unlikely. We're not in COVID times anymore where items that were garbage, garbage is a strong word because I think Battle Styles is not a bad set, but Battle Styles was pre-selling for 150, right? And I think that's a little bit of a different situation. Whereas if we do see all the high demand items start to finally get, gone from distributors, it doesn't all of a sudden, in my mind, seem to make sense that now every new set release just starts to climb up in price because there's nothing else to purchase, right? I could be wrong, right? Maybe people are like, well, dang, I might as well purchase this crappy product. But I feel like most people are going to just leave the market entirely because there's not that same hype for Pokemon if they don't find a way to be able to have consistent high demand product, right? And so with that, I feel like that really ultimately leads into the main topic of conversation for today, which is Paldean Fates, right? It's an extremely controversial set because some people are like, it's a shiny set. Woo, everyone loves shiny Pokemon. But then also it feels like Shining Fates 2.0. And so where we are within the Scarlet and Violet era, it's a question of what's going to be the future of Pokemon and how we can see high demand sets potentially keep the overall volume of purchases going.
Well, let's why don't we talk about Shining Fates, right? Because if anyone wasn't around in the hobby back then, Shining Fates was not this set everyone dumped on and hated on and it was crap. Shining Fates, if you don't remember, that was an $80 to $100 ETB. They were selling for that. That was a high demand, high priced item. It wasn't until they got a massive late reprint where it just smacked it down to the low 40s, high 30s, whatever it settled at. But that actually did well out of the gate. It sold well. It price rise fast. People will say it was some just residual leftovers from the pandemic era because it was kind of coming out of the pandemic times. But that was a good set out of the gate. Hidden Fates. I mean, one of the most hyped sets in all of Pokemon. Again, a little before the pandemic, into the pandemic, had a lot to do with that. People can say, but the other two Shining sets actually did perform well. The reprints both smacked them down and kind of made them stagnant. Hidden Fates is kind of up and down. Shining Fates is now finally starting to have some movement. But I think that has to be said when we're talking about these Shining sets. You're muted.
Thank you. It's a tough one, I would say, because Shining Fates obviously kind of performed well out the gate, but like in large part, it was attributed to COVID, obviously, right? And so it's really difficult for myself because I feel like this has been kind of a theme with Pokemon, but it feels more prevalent more so recently, where they feel as if they can give you like a few like big hitter cards, quote unquote, and then oversaturate the rest of the set with like hits, but not ones that people really care about or are chasing. And like that was kind of what made Hidden Fate such an amazing set because you had a Charizard, you had an Umbreon, you had a Sylveon, you had I mean, the list goes on. There's so many different cards you were chasing, right? Versus with Shining Fates, like you had a Charizard, you had a Lapras, you had a Ditto. I mean, people like the regular baby shiny Suicune, but like there wasn't really like more than maybe 5 to 7 or 8 different cards that people were realistically chasing. And even then, I feel like that's too many. There was just not the same amount of top hitter cards that people desired. And there was just a ton of baby shinies from like the Galarian region that people were like, okay, well, I'm not a huge Galar fan, but I might as well master set it. And baby shiny prices, of course, were stupid cheap. I mean, I remember at one point, I mean, they're probably still cheap now. I mean, I remember when I purchased them, I told myself I was going to wait till the average price of a baby shiny was going down to $5. And since then, I remember at one point seeing them down to like $3.50 to $4 a baby shiny on average. So it's like, holy crap. Some of the prices of these baby shinies are so stupid cheap because no one cares about them. And, I look at Paldean Fates, and I hate to say it, but it's like, sure, there's more full arts, but that's not the new thing, right? Alternate arts are the new thing. And of that, we've got a shiny Mew alternate art, we've got a shiny Charizard alternate art, and then we've got a Gardevoir. And then the general trainer alternate arts. Okay, cool. We got another Iono. I don't know. It's like, I understand it's a competitively viable card they're trying to push, but it's like, we got the Iono tournament collection that's going to be coming out. We've already gotten the Iono from Paldean, the previously Paldean set, right? Paldea Evolved. And it's like, now we're getting a third. It just feels like they're doing the same old of throwing Charizards in the sets, hoping that it's going to make everyone want to purchase it with the, waifu that everyone likes, and then calling it a day with a couple other items. And that's kind of it. Like, where's more that comes into that? I don't know. What are your kind of thoughts?
I mean, if you want my honest opinion, like we can sit here and try to talk it up, but I'd probably just leave it for now. I mean, that's my honest opinion. Like, you got SV5 right around the corner. 151 still popping. There's still some deals to be had on Sword and Shield. Like, it just feels like one of those sets where there's no rush. I mean, maybe some of the cards pop off. Like, I just don't see it. I mean, I've been critical of it right when it got announced, and I just don't think there's a rush to move into it.
Yeah. Well, and here's the real question I feel like that we should be asking ourselves, right? Is comparing it to more than just Shining Fates. I know it's a set that we want to compare to Shining Fates because it feels like such a similar set. But at the end of the day, right? Shining Legends, when that set first came out, people hated it. So much disdain for the set, right? It performed extremely poorly out the gate, and now we've seen the price of it just continuously climb. I know obviously prices have gone down for it a little bit, but in the grand scheme of things, right? I mean, I remember it was at one point sitting on shelves being flash sold for like $35 because of like rollback pricing on Walmart. Like, it was stupid how cheap that item was selling for. And so
the Ultra Premium Collection was $39.99 clearance at Walmart.
Holy crap.
Super Premium Collection back then.
Yeah, that's so it's like, as much as we sit here and we say, oh, Shining Fates is whatever, Paldean Fates is whatever, history is always going to tell a different story, right? And so I think kind of going back and looking at some of these older sets is an important thing to decipher, because I mean, Celebrations is another perfect example. Arguably, one of the most collectible sets in all of Pokemon, because it is a specialty set that is extremely unique because it's based off the anniversary of Pokemon. It only happens one every 5 years. And with that, it has its own uniqueness because there's only going to ever be one 25th anniversary, right? And the prices of the ETBs are above MSRP, but not like a crazy amount. Like, you can find it for anywhere between $20 to $30 above MSRP for a set that, as crazy as it sounds to think about, guys, it came out at the end of 2021 and we're already into 2024. So it's more than several years old now. So it's still cheap, right? Shining Fates got a reprint right before it went out of rotation, literally this last year. It's gotten at least 3 reprints at this point. It had its initial wave. It got a reprint the following year around the same time Vivid Voltage and Darkness Ablaze ETBs got reprinted and the price crashed. It finally recovered, and then it got another reprint right before it went out of rotation last year. So it's like, it's performed strong for the supply it's had, but like, it keeps getting battered down because it's been reprinted endlessly for the ETB prices, right? And so it's really a question in my mind of like, I know we always have recency bias, but like, comparing it to some of even like the better of the specialty sets, I mean, it's not like they're performing crazy and popping off. Sure, they're holding stronger than, wholesale prices or below MSRP, but even then, in specifics with Celebrations, it was a set that was also going to be cut off without another reprint after January. They made that announcement, and since then we haven't seen any more supply. So in Paldean Fates as well, like I told you guys before, Celebrations out the gate, the initial wave I got was 800 ETBs. We've gotten over 2,000 ETBs with Paldean Fates. So, it could also be a supply coming out the gate that plays it. I mean, there's a lot of factors at play, obviously, I guess is the point that I'm making with this.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny how like you can literally say the same thing, but like using different terms and make it sound bad and worse. Like Celebrations, you could say, on TCG Player, it's in the 80s. You could say it's only $30 over MSRP, right? But then you could also say, okay, I'm looking at it right now. It was released in October 21, so it's just over 2 years old, right? And it's 60% plus up. I mean, now it sounds a whole lot better, right? Like now it's starting to seem like, okay, 60% in a little over 2 years, I'll take it. So it's just like, but yeah, I mean, celebrations again, it's an outlier. Like, you know, Pokemon Go, Shining Face isn't like that. You know, Crown Zenith's got a huge reprint. Like celebrations, especially set. Like if you go back and look at Generations, like those are outliers, right? Eli's right though. Shining Fates, like or Shining Legends. For me, I think I just got really lucky. I liked the sets that no one else liked. Like Evolutions was one of my favorite sets when I got back in the hobby. I loved Shining Legends because it reminded me of, you know, the Neo Destiny, Neo Revelation Shinies. And so like I bought a whole lot of that stuff when no one else wanted it and did really well with it. So like it's weird for me to hear like all these sets that were, you know, when they were hated, because like I always liked them, and I'm trying to look for things like that in Shining in Paldean Fates. And I just can't. I can't look at it and say, oh, even though everyone else is hating on it, I love it because of X, Y, and Z. I just don't see it. I don't see it being a celebrations. I mean, maybe not as hated as Pokemon Go, but it might be down there.
Well, here's an interesting point to kind of go on what you mentioned. Obviously, you know, 30% higher. So it's like 60% from its all-time high. But here's the question, right? How long has it been at that $80 price point, right? Because if you look at it on TCG Player, which only has a 1-year chart, it's been sitting at that $88 or that $80 price point for the past year. And if you go even further to that, it's been sitting at that $80 price point for more than a year and a half now. And so it's ultimately not even a question of like, oh, is it performing better? I mean, obviously it is a better set, right? Inherently, I like the reasons I mentioned. But you would think for a set that's as old as it is, sure, it's up, but it's been up at this price for the past year and a half, whereas Lost Origin, Silver Tempest have already gotten, you know, another reprint, and since then the prices were climbing, right? And they're recovering as is. And so how is it that you have these sets, right? And, you know, maybe that's a conversation of the longevity of return in the short term versus long term of ETBs versus booster box, but that's a completely different conversation, right? That you have such a amazing collectible set that's been going sideways for the longest time, and it is a much shorter print than these other more popular sets, right? And maybe even more so to that, it's a question of, hey, when it comes to just the history of all of these specialty sets since the Sword and Shield era, even the ones that are better performers haven't really been moving. Like if you go back and look, is there any sort of specialty set? Heck, even going back to Hidden Fates. I mean, I've been saying it forever, right? Hidden Fates, it was at one point over $300. It got its reprint. It kind of, you know, bounced up into 170s. And since then, it hasn't really done much. And it's been several years. I mean, that reprint happened at the start of 2021. So it's like, what is going on with specialty sets? Because we always want to dog on the sets that, you know, might not look the best because they feel like they're lackluster, which, you know, there's credit to that. But also from a performance perspective, there isn't really any of the ETBs that we can look at in the past 3 to 4 years that are specialty ETBs that have really popped off recently. I don't know if I'm missing one.
Champion's Path.
Oh, Champion's Path. I mean, yeah, I guess you can say Champion's Path, but Champion's Path is a hard example for me. Because Champion's Path, I look at it as Rebel Clash Light. So what I mean by that is Rebel Clash didn't have a second print whatsoever, which is why the price just skyrocketed up. Champion's Path did technically have a reprint wave, but it was tiny. Like it was very minimal. And it did correct the prices back down to MSRP, but it corrected during the peak of supply chain issues within the market, and it never got a reprint after that. And so the supply for it was super duper low out the gate. And with that, you saw the prices hold really strong because there wasn't a ton of it that was going out onto the market. And then once that, you know, additional supply kind of, you know, got its way out of the market, you then saw the prices kind of go up extremely aggressively. But then since then, that $100 price point, it's still been sitting at that $100 price point for at least the past year or two now at this point, or a year and a half, I should say.
I mean, you know, it's just, here's the thing. It's really hard to try to like cherry pick time frames, right? When you're talking about investing. Now, if you're talking about like trying to make the most money. Like that's where you come into play and you know, talk about all the different business strategies. But when you're investing for the long term, that's why you have to have a long-term mindset. Like you could literally pick any stock on the stock market in any certain time and show how it hasn't moved in a year or 2 years. And then all of a sudden it pops off, right? And the same thing is with Pokemon. Like we're seeing mid-era Sun and Moon sets like Forbidden Light, Celestial Storm, Lost Thunder. I mean, pop off right now, seeing 20, 30% moves out of nowhere. And the same thing happens with these ETBs or these specialty sets, these regular sets is you don't know when it happens, right? Like Celebrations, maybe it has a huge growth in its first year. It goes to $80 and it doesn't have as much for the next 1 or 2 years. Then maybe the third year or fourth year, it goes, you know, another $30, $40. It's like, so that's why I just really like to take the whole picture and say, well, hey, since it's been released or in the last 5 years, what are your returns? Because yeah, you could always say, well, I should have sold the Celebrations ETBs right after they got to 80 because I'm just sitting on the same returns. I could have rinsed and repeated that money. Or you could say, oh, I should have sold the Sun and Moon, you know, booster box here. It's like, well, you know, it's so hard to, you know, cherry pick those right dates and stuff. And that's why it has to be a long-term game. Like I'm not one of those people who's like, it's got to be three to 5 years, at least 3 to 5 years. But it does have to be enough time to get enough data, you know, points to really see like how it's moving over time periods. Because there's always going to be times of stagnation. There's always going to be ups. There's always going to be downs. But, you know, I just think you have to give things some time, you know?
Well, and that's the thing is like the time frame of 3 to 5 years is given as a time frame for the reason of everything has a market cycle and you can't predict when the market cycle starts and, you know, ends because it's always going to restart itself, right? It's going to have its highs, it's going to have its lows. And so what you're hoping to predict is that at some point within that 3 to 5 year period, there is a positive market cycle that allows your product to get a large return to where it now feels profitable enough for you to sell the product, right? But ultimately, kind of like you were saying, with it being a long-term game regardless and trying not to cherry pick timeframes, I think ultimately, if we're really trying to follow that same thought process, the question really is, do we think that as much as we have a disdain for Paldean Fates, which maybe yours is different than mine, my disdain for Paldean Fates is because I feel like it's an inherently lazy set. That's what I have a disdain for. It's another Charizard set, and I'm just sick of the Charizard sets with very minimal big hitter cards other than your just general baby shiny full arts. I want more alternate arts within the set, right? There's just so much that they could have added that they didn't, right? That's my disdain for the set. However, a lot of people saw Shining Legends in the same way. And like we both said, it was being flash sold like crazy. I guess the ultimate question we should really be asking ourselves is, do we think that it's possible that Shining Fates, or sorry, dude, it's all the same names. Shining Fates, Shining Legends, Paldean Fates. Do we think Paldean Fates could be the next Shining Legends? And ultimately, could it be a set that, sure, we have disdain for it now, but like you said, if we give it enough time, it could ultimately be a set that could perform extremely well because sure, there's not a ton of hits, but neither was there for Sun and Moon, but nostalgic is the only thing that really matters at the end of the day. Because people are still liking Shining Legends because it does have a Mewtwo in it, right? It does have certain shiny Pokemon that people like. And as much as I hate to say it, like, sure, I'm upset with the shiny Charizard, but like it does have a shiny Gardevoir, it does have a shiny Mew, and that's a Pokemon that people love to collect. It's very collectible.
Rayquaza?
Oh, that is a good point. Yeah, the Rayquaza was definitely good. Dude, that sucks. I wish we had that in that set. Dude, oh man.
Yeah. I think I figured out, you know, the problem here. See, Shining Fates only has one Charizard, right? And if you go to Champion's Path, they got 2 and they got a third one as the promo. So I think Paldean Fates just needs more Charizards.
I think you're onto something. I think that what I basically just heard is Obsidian Flames is going to $1,000 next year. Is what I just heard.
Let's talk about that. You know, I know we're talking about specialty sets, but guys, let's talk about that. Obsidian Flames, Paldea Evolved. These are selling for over $100 a box on TCG Player. These are sets that were $80 and $90 around Christmas time and Thanksgiving on multiple marketplaces, TikTok, eBay. You got coupons that were even cheaper. People were saying Scarlet and Violet era sucks. It's never going to move. We're already seeing these boxes in the hundreds 4, 5, 6 months after release. That shows me strength right there. People actually like this stuff again.
It's such a weird argument to make because, like, literally, you're like, oh my God, it's not at wholesale. That's crazy. But, like, at the same time, if you're making that argument with Chilling Reign and Fusion Strike, it was a big deal, right? So it is kind of weird to feel. I will say, though, I can't really say it's extremely surprising, though, because if you do look at like the price history of those two sets compared to the rest of the Scarlet and Violet era product, right? So like Paradox Rift and base set, only two other boosters, right? It's not like there's a crazy amount. They did hold up stronger. That I will say, but maybe that's also because Scarlet and Violet base did get a massive print, because with the Lost Origin Silver Tempest reprint, you had more supply that was reprinted with that. Paradox Rift being the most recent set, so it has the most recent amount of price correction. You know, I don't know. It's hard because I don't want to disregard like, oh my God, like it's happening, but like also at the end of the day, it's just a weird thing to oh man, I don't know, dude. I'm trying to find the words for what I'm trying to say here.
Paradox is just new, but there's nothing wrong with Paradox Rift. That set's going to do fine, just like Obsidian and Paldea. Base set, it's just weak, man. Let's be honest. It's just a weak set.
Yeah.
Paradox will be fine.
Yeah, no, I think Paradox will be fine for sure. But yeah, no, I mean, if we go back and just kind of look at the prices right now for Paldean, it's always so deceiving because you look at what it's showing on the charts and it's not indicative of what it's actually showing because people forget to add shipping costs.
Yeah.
But it's selling right now for around 105 a booster, which, you know, that's still like $10 over MSRP or wholesale for most distributors. But like, I'm actually curious. I want to see what I can go get it for my distributors' pages because I know.
I just want to make sure you almost said MSRP. You were about to trigger me.
Oh, did I say? Oh yeah, no, I meant wholesale. I apologize if I misspoke.
Dude, what is up with MSRP being talked about in this hobby?
Who even knows, man? MSRP is disregarded.
That's for everyone out there who didn't see my video that doesn't know MSRP. MSRP right now for booster boxes is like $161. Meaning, if you are to buy into any of these boxes right now at anywhere from 80s to 100, you are going to be up about 60 to 70% by the time they get to MSRP. So when people are saying you didn't make any money, it's still at MSRP 2 years later. No, you've made 60 or 70% if it gets to MSRP. Let's be clear here.
I mean, let's be even more clear here. Do we really think that Pokemon would ever require people to sell their product at MSRP? Like kind of
Walmart, here, if you go to Walmart, they don't sell loaves of bread at MSRP. Like you can see like on the bread, it'll say like $4.29 and Walmart will have on the shelf for $2.99. Like MSRP is a suggestion, guys. Like it's never been meant to use. It just blows my mind. I can't talk about it anymore.
Yeah, so one of my main distributors that I'm looking at right now, they don't have booster boxes on their site, and then there is another one that does have booster boxes available, but it's at a higher price. So, you know, maybe that's a real question to be had about these items not being on distributor pages anymore, right? And maybe that even leads into the next conversation with temporal forces, which I mean, we discussed temporal forces and it being short printed, right?
Hold on, stop right there. What's not on distribution websites anymore?
Oh, I was just saying that obviously I don't want to get too much into specifics because for privacy reasons, for not getting myself in trouble. But on most of my distributors that I'm looking at right now, it seems as if Obsidian Flames and Paldea Evolved are starting to dwindle on supply for my distributors. I do see one in particular that does still have it available, but the supply of it in terms of its pricing, it's priced slightly higher than what the typical wholesale cost has been most recently. So I guess what I'm kind of saying is it's still technically available at distributors right now, but it almost feels as if actually it's starting to dwindle in its general supply. from the majority of these distributors. And so it leads the question into, okay, well, for the longest time, we've been really thinking about the set in the same way as like the majority of the Scarlet and Violet era, which is, oh, these sets are garbage. No one cares about them. Like the supply is just, just going to be on the market. But in reality, we need to really think about the supply of what's going on at wholesale, distributor pages, because that's kind of what ends up leading into the next transition of pricing in the market. Once we start, kind of like what we were just talking about with 151 product at the very beginning of the video, we're saying, oh, well, 151 product is starting to leave distributor pages. Therefore, we're starting to see a price up in the market. Well, okay, well, we're starting to see that with some Scarlet and Violet era products. So maybe that's something that's still worth paying attention to, as long as we start to notice it's no longer available on certain distributor pages and it's starting to dwindle in availability.
Yeah, it's just, comes back. It's like, Scarlet and Violet, like this time kind of gets compared to XY a lot. A lot of people are talking about like, it's like XY era. There's not as much demand. Things are going to the moon. Things are going to sit longer until they move. It's like, okay, well, then if we go back to XY era, they only picked and chose certain sets to reprint. Like not every set got reprinted. Not every set got huge prints. So could Scarlet and Violet be the same way? You can always say, yeah, we're still in the reprint window now for another year and a half or so. But will they come back and reprint all these sets? They might not. They might come back and reprint some. So that's going to be, yet to be seen too.
Well, didn't they also just recently announce too that it was going to be, I think it was April. I can't remember what day in April, but I think the Pokemon company announced that for April, it was going to be the official rotation cycle for all of the e-cards, if I'm correct. So Chilling Reign, Battle Styles, Evolving Skies, and Fusion Strike were officially all about to go out of rotation coming into April, if I'm correct. I think Danny Phantom also made a video on that too. I wouldn't know. Yeah, you wouldn't know. Well, it's like, if we think about the derotation, right, which was the first half of Sword and Shield, right? Other than Shining Fates ETBs, I can't really think if there was an item that was really reprinted. I don't think there was. I think it just kind of happened. We've seen instances of like, in the past where we had Roaring Skies all of a sudden randomly get a like reprint right before it goes out of rotation. But I can't really think if within the past, year or so of a set that got a reprint right before its rotation. Who knows? I could be wrong. Okay, correct. April 5th. All right, thank you. I don't know, dude. I wonder if we're gonna get something last second, but it feels extremely unlikely, at least if we're going off of what happened with the 2023 rotational cycle.
Honestly, guys, like here's my feeling on it. Especially if you're not like, if you're strapped for cash, or if you have to like pick and choose what you're moving into. If you just look back at all the specialty sets, like ever since like past the pandemic times, you'd probably be better off just sticking with the booster box sets. From what I've seen, but so if you're not super enamored with Paldean Fates, maybe it's one to skip.
Yeah, no. So it confirmed. Yep, April 5th, Pokemon Company announced it that's when it's going to go out of rotation. Also, there's some other miscellaneous cards that, because I don't know. It sounds like you don't really pay attention to what goes on in the standard rotation for the market, but there will be some competitive cards that will go down in value. So you will see a huge dynamic shift in the market with that. Because like, I feel like why that can also be extremely important is for those of you guys that remember the derotation, you had scoop up nets that went up to like $6 a piece, and they're an uncommon trainer card. Like, it was insane how expensive it was. And now it's probably selling for like 20 cents. So for those of you guys that like to like sift your bulk for highly expensive competitive cards, just remember all of your Fusion Strike, VIP passes and other cards that are within, the 2021 Sword and Shield era, they're about to go out of rotation. So, but here's an even more interesting question, right? If we say to ourselves that all of these items are going to go out of rotation, and that's the official announcement, as weird as this sounds, I think it's unlikely, but I mean, in theory, we could still see another Brilliant Star Astral Radiance or Lost Origin Silver Tempest. I mean, I don't know, dude. I don't know. It's weird because you would assume with there being a lag in time because of COVID that they would just take all of Sword and Shield. I don't know. Actually, that wouldn't make sense though. They'd want to keep the second half of Sword. Dude, I don't know. It's confusing to see what the Pokemon Company is going to do here at this point.
There's no way they're printing any more Sword and Shield. There is no way.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I know a lot of people think like, I mean, I'm just not one of those people that think the Pokemon Company doesn't pay attention to the secondary market. I think they're smart and they do. I just think if they start doing that stuff, they're going to just continue to lose so much confidence in the market and in the products, and it'll hurt them more than it'll help them with like a small temporary cash infusion.
I don't know if. Well, why would it hurt them? It wouldn't be the first time
because it'll stop people from wanting to buy the products more, because they'll just wait for years and years to ever buy the boxes, like because they're going to constantly be so scared for reprints. So like,
but I think you're missing. I think you're missing my point though. Standard rotation only lasts for 2 years, and standard rotation is based on the competitive format in which a card is given a like standard letter at the bottom. The thing is they delayed it by a year because they didn't run any tournament events for COVID. So basically, it's one of those things where because of that delay, it caused a weird shift in the market where you had cards that were in rotation that technically should have been out of rotation a year prior. So it's not a matter of like, oh, are we going to lose faith that Pokemon is going to keep reprinting things in standard rotation? It's like, no, Pokemon has always reprinted things in standard rotation. It's that there's just a lot of these sets that would typically start to move out of rotation that haven't yet because of the way in which things got delayed due to COVID. So, I mean, if hypothetically we did get a 2022 Sword and Shield reprint, it wouldn't be out of the woodworks because Pokemon has done that extremely, like that's something that's very common that they've always done historically. It's just a weird time in the market because, you know, the market is not what it used to be anymore because things, I mean, like it's kind of like the Olympics, right? We're getting the Olympics this year in 2024, but we had the 2020 Olympics in 2021. So it's only been a 3-year wait since then. And they still stayed right on schedule, right? And people aren't complaining, oh my God, they should have waited 4 years. Olympics happen every 4 years. You know, they're losing their validity. It's like, no, they're going back to the regular schedule of how things were. So it's like, would it make sense for them to like double rotate things out? It wouldn't really though, because it's a little different because they need competitive sets to be within the market at all times, or else you're going to have a lack of diversity when it comes to deck creation. I don't know. It's a weird one to really think about. But yeah, as far as it goes, we obviously have temporal forces coming up. That's obviously going to be short printed, quote unquote. I think that's going to be a real big indicator of really where we're going to move on things, especially because like I was telling you, literally, you know, Paldean Fates is coming out this week. And I just got my Paldean Fates yesterday. And we're just now finally getting it all shipped out. And the deadline for Temporal Forces pre-orders is today. So while I'm literally in the process of shipping out product for the previous set, I'm currently in the process of having to scramble for deadlines for the next set that comes out at the end of March. So it's like the Pokemon Company just feels like they're jamming and cramming sets. I almost wonder if it's part and parcel because they want to try and get more sets within the rotation so that they can start, you know, getting back on track. I don't know. Maybe that's just kind of a crackpot theory of mine, but we'll kind of see what ends up happening with temporal forces and then whatever the following set is going to be thereafter.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll see what happens with that. I mean, here's the thing, like with the rotation stuff, it's like, I don't know how much it'll definitely affect the singles that are in play, but I don't know how much it'll affect the sealed value. You know, I think, you know, after you reach that 2-3 year mark on sealed product, the singles kind of start getting detached from the sealed value, and the box kind of holds its value on its own. So definitely for anyone who's making plays in the single market or holding any of those singles, I'd keep a close eye on that. For any of the sealed product, I think you're okay.
Well, it's not really a question, I guess, of oh, do we think singles are going to be safe? Because they're obviously not, like for the competitive cards within the rotation, because that's what gets hurt the most, right? Because they're no longer part of rotation. I guess for myself, it's a matter of just how the Pokemon Company is trying to address the fact that they're behind a year on standard rotation. That's kind of what I mean, because then there's now confusion, whereas before the Pokemon Company made it very clear they're going to always have a possibility of printing cards that are in the current rotation. That's how they've always said it. That's how it's always been, right? However, recently you have sets that typically would not be in rotation that are, because they extended it by a year due to COVID.
No, I know what you're saying. Here, let me ask you this: how many sets have got another reprint like that? Because let me think about it. Brilliant Stars already had one. You know, Lost Origin, Silver Tempest, Crown Zenith already got one. Like, how many sets got another one right after big ones like that? Not many, right?
Well, I guess I'm confused in what you're referencing.
Well, like referencing, like, you know, if they do decide, hey, we're gonna keep rotation out a year, so all these are still within the reprint window. Like, why would they? I just don't see them still going back and reprinting those sets. Like,
oh yeah, only Shining Fates. Shining Fates. So if you take the cards that are currently in, or that were in rotation, that typically should not have been in rotation, only Shining Fates, right? And so that's the ultimate question, I guess, right? That I'm trying to ask is, you have these cards in rotation. So technically, according to, like, you know, Pokemon rules, or how they've always established things, these things are technically still able to be reprinted, but so far it's been shown that they haven't done that other than Shining Fate. So it doesn't really make sense to me why why they're technically still in rotation, unless they just have a fear of accidentally thinning out the market too much in competitive viable cards. So the hypothesis that I was putting is, maybe the reason why we're having recent sets so close to one another is because they're trying to speed up the process of starting to move more items out of rotation faster and faster, so they can go back to the new norm, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's yet to be seen, right? Yet to be seen. I'm in the camp. I just doubt it. I mean, I understand they can and they might, but I can't see it happening, man.
Yeah. Do you want to start going into questions now that we've kind of passed? What's up?
What you see? You see any good ones?
What do I see? I don't know. Let's start to see. What is some questions that are popping up right now? Let me see if I can find a good one off the bat. I feel like there were some questions that were asked early on, but I don't know if they were ones worth discussing unless you wanted to discuss One Piece.
Where's your stance on One Piece?
My stance is, I don't know enough about it to give a proper stance. I'm so involved in Pokemon and Magic at the moment in time. I feel like One Piece is not, that's something, like, here's my thing, right, with One Piece, and we're talking English here, right? Not Japanese.
No, I've never talked Japanese.
Yeah. Well, for myself, if I want to get product One Piece from distributors, there's only two that offer it. And for myself, they're going to absolutely destroy you by requiring you to pick up other product that is going to be way more expensive than with most distributors, just for you to have the possibility of picking up a case or two of One Piece. And so for myself, I guess it hasn't been something that I've paid too much attention to, because I don't have the possible availability of going and picking it up. Because right now, for example, with what we're purchasing at our, like, distributors, we're paying $88 a booster box. If I want to go to the other distributors that are currently supplying the product for One Piece, they're charging around $100 a booster box. And from the conversations I've had with some of their reps, they're not very eager to negotiate pricing. And so for myself, it's a conversation of, does it make sense for me as a business owner to go start charging my customers in the wholesale program $12 more a booster box, just for them to now fight over 12 boosters worth of One Piece that potentially are going to be split amongst, like, people? Like, how does that, there's no incentive for me in that regard. So that's why I've kind of stayed out of it. You know, if people are wondering, it's not that I don't think it could continue to do well, because it's come out with the live action. You know, the anime is still relevant. It's a very popular one. You know, I think there's still a lot of fundamentals that are keeping One Piece up, and maybe there is some, you know, overvaluing of it because of all the hype around it, but that's for a different conversation. Ultimately, at the end of the day, for myself, I just try and stay out of it because it's something that I don't really know. And unless I feel comfortable enough to really either do the research, which sadly I don't have the time for, or get it at a price that feels appropriate, which it's not available to me at, I just much rather move on and then just let people kind of do what they do.
Yeah, and like I don't know what anyone thinks like I know, but like guys, I don't have insider info on One Piece. I'm not an expert on One Piece. I kind of take the same route I do in a lot of things in my life. I mean, if something I don't know a lot about, I try to surround myself with people that do know a lot about it and talk to people who are educated on it and stay up to date. And so, kind of the same way like the president has his cabinet or like, CEOs and stuff have their like board or their group of people. Like that's what I do. I always try to keep people around that keep up to date and know all the ins and outs of the cards and the boxes and the sets and the anime and all that. And so I just listen to those people. I listen to them and I make my decision based off that. So that's why I moved into One Piece. That's why I still buy it. Like I think the hype's still there. If you're gonna start asking me about like the cards and the play or this or that, don't know. Very clear, very honest about that. I know very little about One Piece, but I invest in it because I see the opportunity there and I trust the people I talk to. Simple as that.
So we talked about obviously specialty sets is the main topic of discussion for today's video, but I think this is a good one to kind of play on theme with that. What are our thoughts on the price trajectory of Shining Fates in the future?
Shining Fates, I think it's drying up. I think it's finally drying up. We're starting to see movement finally, ever so slightly, maybe 10, 15% up. But I think I'm starting to see like less sellers available, and of the sellers that have stuff available, there's less quantities, there's less sealed cases on the market. And I think if it's a set you're wanting to get into, I do see an upside to it. Now, am I going to tell you it's the best thing you can buy right now? No, maybe not. But yeah, I see positives in the year or two to come.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, kind of within the general theme of what we discussed within rotation, or not rotation, sorry. Within specialty sets since Hidden Fates, a lot of them have either, gone sideways or down because they got more supply. You haven't really seen a lot go like crazy up. So for myself, I feel like it's definitely going to take some time before it does go up in price. But for myself, in the long term, I can definitely see it being a set that follows similar suit to Shining Legends and eventually going up in time exponentially. But it's going to take at least, until the next bull market cycle, which could happen in 3 years, 5 years. Don't have a crystal ball on that one, but I think that's kind of the best answer I can give rather than just kind of tying a price point to it, just because, Celebrations is an item that we love a ton, but it's consistently gone sideways for the past year and a half now at $80. And so if I had said, yeah, I think it could be to $100 based on its current trajectory, well, its trajectory has been sideways. So it's like, you never
feel
know.
The same way about Pokemon Go, right?
Oh, of course, dude. Pokemon Go to the moon. But like, yeah, because at the end of the day, it's not a matter of like, do I think this is going to have a 5% steady growth year over year? It's a matter of it's been 5 years, it's gone sideways, and then all of a sudden it goes up 100% in like a month. Because that's just how a lot of the time the market works. We just use averages over the year span of when you purchase the product at, right? Here's another point. This is kind of being brought up by Derek. He says we're discounting the fact that rotation has an effect on Scarlet and Violet pumps. Willing to bet the rotation after base set release caused the prior blockage sets to rise as well. What are your thoughts on that kind of general statement?
I mean, I understand that like the Obsidian Flame stuff's playable. I mean, I think Paldea is more driven by the collector value. I mean, I think it's I know Iono's playable. I think it's a Magikarp. I think a lot of the illustration rares, since they're gradable, a lot of those are being chased after now. Like, I mean, obviously it's something to do with it. I mean, it's always gonna have something to do with it when it's brand new sets and they're playable. But I mean, to the point, like that's the only reason they're rising. I don't see that.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of discussion because, I mean, obviously you did see Scarlet and Violet base get absolutely dumped because of the Lost Origin Silver Tempest reprint being tied to Scarlet and Violet base reprint. So you can look at that. But Paldean Fates, I feel like you can definitely make an argument that it helped aid the set. But like, I can't say necessarily that like it was the main driving factor, because kind of like with Fusion Strike, for example, Fusion Strike was a set that, I mean, it had the VIP battle passes, and before that it had the Explorer. And with that, you know, more specifically, VIP has been the more predominantly high value card within the set. Chilling Reign has very few cards within it, if like any, that are of value that are part of the competitive scene at this point. And so for myself, it's like, okay, well, why can't we say the same thing for Fusion Strike with the Genesect cards, with the Mew cards, like with the Fusion Strike energy cards? There are so many competitive cards that were within Fusion Strike, and yet Chilling Reign has still outperformed it, right? And for that reason, it makes it a difficult argument to say that Paldea Evolved is being discounted based on the fact of rotation, because you didn't see that happen with the, and you know, understandably it was a set that, you know, was still available there after the fact of all of the other competitive sets being around. But I don't know, it's just hard, it's hard for me to really say that, because you didn't see that with previous sets having a real effect.
Here's the thing, guys. Like, this isn't Magic the Gathering, right? Like, Pokemon is a collector's hobby. The game is definitely more popular than it was, and it definitely equates to some value because of the playability. But at the end of the day, it's still largely more a collector's hobby. That's why, like, it's all about the grading. That's why, like, it's just it performs a lot different than Magic and other playable games. So that's why the playability doesn't have as much of an effect as like other TCGs.
Here's an interesting question or statement. If you guys want to just literally finish your question with a question mark, then it makes it easier for me to know what's kind of like a question or not. Don't you think Pokemon's are a lot of manipulation from vague store? I don't know what he means by vague stores, but it seems like anyone can start a store so that the sets are sold earlier. That has probably been happening for years. I don't know. What do you kind of interpret this statement? It's a little confusing. I think what he's trying to say is, don't you think that there's a possibility of prices of products being pre-sold before they become available on the market because anyone can open a Pokemon store? I don't know. How do you kind of interpret the question?
I don't know. I saw that earlier. I don't know how to interpret it. Like, yeah, I mean, you can pre-sell products as a store, but we've already seen how the issues that happened, like during COVID times, like people canceling the pre-orders, and other times product would spike, so stores would cancel the pre-orders on the customers. And you know, we were just talking about it before stream. Like, if you sell stuff on TCG Player pre-order, they still have up till almost the date of its release to cancel it on you anyway. It's like,
oh yeah.
So I mean, I don't know how much effect it really has.
Yeah, I was talking to Alex about this before release, or before we went live. You can have pre-order product as a storefront on TCG Player sold. However, they are able to cancel it up until the Wednesday before release of Friday. So 2 days before release. So it's one of those things where there's a lot of nuances to pre-sales, but I don't know. It's a little bit of a confusing question. So if you kind of want to reiterate about it, we can definitely touch on it more. But kind of moving on to some other questions I saw. How is the Sword and Shield base set doing during the point in the Sword and Shield era? I'll kind of just jump on this first. I mean, it's hard to say because Sword and Shield base out the gate was dirt cheap. You were buying it at wholesale at the time. Like, no one was wanting it. And the only reason why it's performed as well as it has is because it never got a reprint because of supply chain issues with COVID. So it's kind of like one of those things where it's hard to give an example of that, because Scarlet and Violet base has had multiple reprints, you know?
I think it's a pretty easy example. Sun and Moon base.
That's literally what I was about to say. No, I was literally about to mention that, because Sun and Moon base got a decent amount of print, and that just kind of sat around forever and ever and ever. I mean, I remember when I got into the hobby, right, as a supplier and got access to distribution, there were still Sun and Moon booster boxes selling at wholesale pricing back in 2020. I mean, literally, you still had Evolution booster boxes available at wholesale prices. So like, it was
Sun and Moon base is in the 260s, 270s.
Yeah, I mean, it's gone up in price, but you have to think about it. If you went in and got the set back in 2017, I think is when it came out, 2017. Yeah, because XY Evolutions was end of 2016. Yeah, so it's like you had to wait years for that set to finally go above wholesale. And I didn't know we're in a different period in time, so I don't think it'll take as long, but just have your kind of expectations tempered a little bit on the time frame it could ultimately take, because we're not in COVID times anymore where everything just goes to the moon always, and also supply is more readily available.
I mean, if it were me, like if I'm auditing my positions and I have a case of every set right now, it'd be one of those that I'd consider moving, just because like when you look back at like Sun and Moon base, that's when it actually had enough supply. That wasn't during COVID. You can see it. It's a weak set. It hasn't risen much. It's still under $300. You have Sword and Shield base. It went a lot faster, but it's still sitting in the under $300 range. Guys, it might sit there for another 2-3 years. You don't know, and so it's like, where else could you, better have that money? Like we could see a lot of those alt art sets shoot up to 300, 400, 500, and Sword and Shield base and Rebel Clash and those still be in the 200s. Like that's a real possibility. So, just know that every booster box doesn't perform the same. Just because you wait, 5 years on every box doesn't mean every box is going to be worth $400 or whatever, number you have in your head. So, yeah, I think Sun and Moon base is a pretty good example of like what happens when there's enough print, kind of like Scarlet Violet base. And even with enough time, like you just might not see the returns you're going to see in some of the better sets.
Yeah. Another question. So my question is, what do you think about the Iono box, and will it cause prices to drop on the booster box? Ha! You know what they're referencing, right?
Yeah, that with a milk carton type thing.
Yep.
I don't pay as close attention to all that stuff, so you'd probably be better to answer that question. Guys, I'm the wrong person to ask about any of the playability, like, all those types of cards. Like, I
think they're more asking that question because like with the milk cartons, they always come out with like a full art or alt art version of specific cards. And so the Iono has an alt art, if I'm correct, within the milk carton. And so I think a lot of people are really asking the question, like, with the release of it, do we think it's going to potentially crash the value? I'm looking right now. So it's going to be a full art card. It's not going to be an alternate art. So with it, it's going to come with one full art foil. And then in addition, it's going to come with 3 of the just general foil Iono cards. So more or less, I guess if we're talking about, do we think it'll cause price drops on the booster boxes? I don't think so, because it goes back to kind of the conversation that we had about taking in Paldean Fates' value into consideration with competitive viability. I don't think that matters. I think it could definitely affect the price of the singles of the Ionos, in particular the non-holo and the like reverse holo foil versions, and how the prices could go down because they're now more readily available for people to put in their decks. But if you look at the Milk Marnie collection or the Shining Fates Marnie, when those came out, it didn't affect the base set Marnie full art price whatsoever. So I don't think it's going to really affect the art designs of the Marnies or the value of the booster box, because that has a completely different value set to it, rather than just the cheapest possible Iono that you can throw in a deck for competitive viability reasons.
Is that what people are asking? If it's going to affect the price of the full art or special illustration rare Iono?
Well, the question was asked is, do you think it will drop the booster box? But obviously we just discussed it, that we don't think standard rotation plays a factor within the value of the booster box when talking about competitive viable cards going out of rotation, right? And so that was kind of something we touched on earlier with that same thought. So I was just kind of expanding upon that.
Yeah, no, that's crazy.
Next question though is fun thing to think about: in 5 years, which booster box will be worth more, Evolving Skies or Cosmic Eclipse? That is a crazy one to think about. That is kind of funny.
Wow.
Oh man,
I'll take Evolving Skies.
Evolving Skies took out. Okay, so Evolving Skies came out in like August 28th, 26th, something like that, like end of August. And Cosmic came out in what, 2019? Oh man, that's
I'll take the LPS.
That's crazy. Was it October Cosmic came out, or I can't remember.
I got it. November
1st. Yep, I couldn't remember. It was October. I remember it was near the end of one of the months, but it was the start. It was November 1st. Yeah, dude. That's so funny to me. I don't know. That's a hard one. Oh man, that is such a hard one, dude.
Evolving Skies, you know it.
I don't know, man. I feel like Evolving Skies has performed so well, and it's hard to say that it can't continue to just perform how it's performed. I love Cosmic Eclipse, I truly do, but it's had so much price upwards momentum, and it's finally started to kind of stop versus Evolving Skies. Oh, I don't know. I honestly, that's such a hard question. I guess I want to like. A part of me wants to say Cosmic is the safer pick, but like Evolving Skies has just performed so strong in such a short period of time after its release. It's hard to say that it can't just outperform Cosmic.
Oh, I think it's 100% going to outperform Cosmic. The question is, will it be worth more, like total dollar amount more?
Well, that's exactly what I mean by outperform it. I mean, because obviously in terms of like its general price, will it overlaps that of Cosmic Eclipse?
Well, I mean, because Cosmic Eclipse could double and then Evolving Skies could, you know.
But I think but the question is, which will be worth more?
I think Evolving Skies.
Right. I don't see. That's the thing is I don't know. I don't know. I think it's possible if Evolving keeps doing what Evolving's doing. I don't know. That's such a hard one. I like slight. Like my gut tells me I want to say Cosmic, but just based on what everything in front of me is showing, it just feels Evolving. Oh man. All right. Another question about Iono. We kind of already talked about it. I guess we can kind of touch about this. All the singles in Sword and Shield are down for the most part. Well, what would they print again? Well, they don't really print based off of single prices. We've seen that with Evolutions. Like they don't give a frick about the singles prices. They want to just crash it. It doesn't matter. Let me see if there's any other questions that we kind of can talk about, because I want to start wrapping it up here. Obviously, we've been going for over an hour, so we'll kind of get the last couple of questions here, and then from there, we'll kind of start to wrap things up. Oh, Don Harrington, $2 donation. Thank you for the $2 donation, Don. I greatly appreciate it, brother.
Don is the #1 supporter of the Pokemon community, man.
Oh, let's go, baby. I was asked a question. How much did you buy Paldean from Distro? $31.25. That's how much we're buying boosters for. Here's an interesting one. Pokemon definitely seems seasonal. Last summer was pretty hot. It felt like. Do we think it will do the same thing this summer? Oh, I 100% think Pokemon seasonal. No doubt about it. I mean, I think in large part this comes down to reprints. I mean, I made a full video talking about this literally within the last video, I think, where, I mean, even 2 videos ago, where I just basically said like, hey, let's take a look at what the Pokemon history has looked like. And other than 2020, within the switch between yellow to silver borders, Pokemon has always had reprints sometime like near the end of the year or going into like the springtime. And then once it hits summer, just never do we see rotations or reprints. Maybe like early summer, because like we had a small reprint of Evolving Skies at like the end of August, but like of 2022 it was. But like other than that, nada. Like that was the only booster box reprint that year anyway. So, but you had 2021 reprints that were all the way from September to like December, and then in 2020 it was like November, December, January, and February, and then obviously this year it was October, November, December. So like you've had consistency within the past, I mean, even going further back, that's just kind of how Pokemon does it. So I think there's no doubt that it's seasonal. And then once it hits summertime, since there's not a ton of reprints, prices tend to like, go up because there's just not a lot of reprints that are going to drive the prices down for people to focus on spending their money and elsewhere. And so all the items that are good items that people want to pick up are finally starting to go up. Honest to God, like, I don't think this is a hot take to say. I think if you really want to talk about when the best time to buy Pokemon product is, it's around Black Friday time, like I said before, and it's near the end of the year as everything's getting reprinted, because then you have this like seasonal period of going into the summer where all of this product has been flushed off, of seller sites, and reprints aren't more than likely not going to happen. And then with that, you now have just a period of growth. And that's just kind of how I at least look at it. I don't know if you have a different opinion on that.
No, I mean, it's a retail product, and retail is seasonal. It's cyclical. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I'm trying to see if there's any other questions.
Pokemon department store is not a believer in Evolving Skies.
He is not a believer in Evolving Skies.
Too much, and it can't go up another $500.
Oh yeah, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe. It does help the algorithm. All right, I'm gonna pick one last question before we kind of round things off.
One last question,
dude. I gotta do one last question.
This better be a good one,
dude. We've been going for a while now. Time flies. Time flies so fast. It's crazy. Let me see. I want to see if I can get a good one that I think will be worth conversing about. Is there anyone that you're seeing in particular?
No, I think you took them. I mean, kind of past that question, there's not a whole lot except just joke questions.
Yeah, right. All right, here's an interesting one. We'll kind of end this on a little bit of like a speculative question. I heard a rumor about a Pokemon reprint with a new card game. What will this do to Pokemon cards? Have you heard anything about a Pokemon card reboot of a card game?
No, I saw that. That's why I was saying it seems like these are joke questions.
Oh, yeah, right. I was like, okay, well, what are we talking about here? All right, well, then here's one that's more of a different question. This is interesting. Will Vivid Voltage ETBs ever go back up, or is Hidden Fates a better play? I think that's actually a solid question.
Wait, what was the first part of it?
Will Vivid Voltage booster ETBs ever go up, or is Hidden Fates a better play?
They are going up. I don't know if anyone's been paying attention. I actually had that in a video recently. Vivid Voltage ETBs, okay, in the past 3 months. So they were down in the mid to low 30s. They're now selling for $45. Lowest list is $44.87. We're talking about a 20% price move in the past couple months. They're moving.
Yeah.
Honestly, for the price point, it sounds so stupid to say, the sets are not comparable, but at the price point, it might outperform. I mean, you have to ask yourself, do I think these ETBs can go from like 40s to 80s faster than Hidden Fates can go from 175 to 350? Yeah, I think that's very possible. Like if you could buy a case of Hidden Fates, right, for let's say, $1,750, $1,800, or you can put $1,800 in Vivid Voltage ETBs, I'd be willing to venture a guess that Vivid Voltage ETBs will be worth more dollar for dollar than Hidden Fates, or percentage gain wise.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't think that's that much of a hot take. I mean, I definitely think that there's got to be a point in which Evolving Skies does go up, Evolving Skies, Hidden Fates does go up. But I guess ultimately, like, just because we're trying to, compare apples to oranges, what do we think is more likely? Do we think that Hidden Fates is going to hit $340 first, or do we think that Vivid Voltage is going to hit $90 first? Because that's like a real serious question if we're talking
Vivid
percentage
voltage.
gain. I mean, obviously, when you're talking about ratio percentage gain of like how much shipping is going to eat into your overall margins, obviously, you know, the higher the value, the less shipping is going to eat into it. But still, like nominally speaking, it feels way more realistic that Vivid could go to $90 at this point compared to $340 for Hidden Fates. And I hate to say that because I love Hidden Fates as a set, but it's going to take a lot of price action for it to move up, especially considering, I mean,
Got some Hidden Fates right here.
oh man, got some Hidden Fates packs.
I
Yeah,
gotta
I
show
don't
the
know.
Hidden Fates off.
I don't know. Like I think Hidden Face is definitely undervalued for what it is. I think it's a safe pickup. I think Vivid Voltage was a riskier pickup, but it definitely makes sense to me when we're comparing from like a nominal percentage gain perspective that it could definitely do better than Hidden Fates.
I mean, if you just like look back, it's just like other than generations, it just seems that people have this, you know, a lot of these booster box or these ETBs, they just kind of stagnate out in those like upper hundreds, you know, $100, $200, $300 range. It's hard. It's very easy, it seems, for ETBs to push to, you know, $70, $80, $90, $100. It's very hard to push from $100 to $200, $200, $300. It's a much harder push, even though like take the percent gain and all that out of it. It's just $50 from like 40 to 90 is much harder than 200 to 250, it seems.
Yeah. No, 100%. Well, do you have any kind of those closing thoughts that you want to give before we round out today's video?
No, man, it was fun. I'm be interested to see how this whole Paldean Fates thing shakes out and how everyone's liking it.
Yeah, I think that'll be a good question that we'll be conversing about next week, because obviously for you guys that don't already know, Paldean Fates does come out this Friday. So be prepped to see what prices are going to look like with that. I mean, they're already at $44 right now on TCG Player. Will prices go down? Will prices stay the same? Will they go up? Who knows? Time is going to tell. It's definitely something we'll touch on in next week's video. But until then, don't forget to leave a like, comment down below, subscribe, ladies and gentlemen. But I hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of your day. Peace.